Okay, so in this section I'm going to talk to you about the utilities for my Sage Healer. Here I've pulled up the combat proficiency screen, and on the right you can see where I spent my utility points. In the first section under skillful, I've taken three utilities in this section, including Psychic Suffusion, which allows Force Wave to heal you and up to 7 other allies for a small amount of health. This is nice because it's a free and instantaneous cast. Second utility I've taken is Jedi Resistance. This increases your damage reduction by about 3%. And finally, Pain Bearer, which increases all healing you receive by 10%. In the Masterful section, I've taken Valiance, which reduces the damage taken by a target of your rescue by 25% for 6 seconds. More importantly, it also increases the amount of healing done by your Force Mend, your self-heal, by 30%. Next, I've taken Telekinetic Defense, which increases the amount of damage absorbed by your Force Armor or Bubble by 10%, so a very useful skill for a healer. Last, in the Heroic section, I've taken Force Mobility. Force Mobility allows you to do one of your largest healing trance, on the run. In the 3.0 era, Sage Healers, because of this utility, have become one of the most mobile healers in the game. Finally, the last utility I've taken in Heroic is called Life Ward. Life Ward lets your Force Armor and your Force Barrier heal you for up to 2% of your total health. So your Force Armor, your bubble that you put on yourself, acts as a heal over time or hot. In this section, we're going to be talking about stat allocations and gearing for a Sage Healer. Now, I've pulled up my statistics sheet for my character on the left here. You can see all of my primary stats and my force stats, such as critical chance, multiplier, and alacrity, on the bottom of the character sheet. Now, the stats that I'm going to give you for the build are a little bit different than my own stats, but these are a result of discussions that I've had with the best healers in our guild and with healers outside of our guild on the server as well. These stat allocations will give you the theoretically most efficient stat allocations possible to give the best possible base heal numbers. Now, to start with, we will start with primary stat, in this case willpower. Willpower should be stacked to 3,700. Anything over 3,700 is into the diminishing returns line. Next, you should be placing your crit at or around 25%. This will vary depending on bonuses from companions and how much primary stats you have. Critical multiplier should be at or around 70%. And finally, alacrity should be somewhere between 6.5% to 7%. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about gearing. To start with, we'll look at the relics. For my Sage Healer, I utilize the Relic of Serendipitous Assault in conjunction with the Relic of Focused Retribution. There are 3 current levels of these relics in the 3.0 era, starting from the crafted 186 version of the relic, which are called Rusan, up to the Revanite level 198 versions that you receive from defeating Malifar in hard mode Temple of Sacrifice. Now, I'm utilizing the Resurrected level, which comes from the story mode version of that operation. The Relic of Serendipitous Assault has a 30% chance upon performing a healing ability or an attacking damaging ability to grant 855 extra power for 6 seconds. Focused Retribution is procced upon similar battle conditions and grants 855 additional primary stat points for 6 seconds. I utilize these 2 relics in particular because they proc on their own and I don't have to click anything else. and considering the frantic nature of healing, it's one less thing for a healer to do. Now, set bonuses. In terms of set bonuses, in the 3.0 era, we recommend that Sage healers utilize the 6-piece set bonus. The 2-piece set bonus within this 6-piece set bonus includes, upon activating a healing ability, grants a 15% chance to give you the Force Mystic's critical bonus proc, which will automatically proc your next deliverance for a critical hit. The 4-piece set bonus restores an additional 5 force to your pool per use of Vindicate, and the 6-piece bonus reduces the healing trance cooldown by 1.5 seconds. Now, while the pre-3.0 era, the 4-piece old set bonus, in addition to the healing trance cooldown, additionally supplies the healer with extra 50 force, that extra 50 force essentially washes even with the 4-piece set bonus from the new set bonus over a 5-minute fight or longer. So we always recommend that Sage healers in 3.0 take the 6-piece set bonus. And finally, let's talk a little bit about quote-unquote healing rotations. Now, DPS utilize specific rotations or specific sets of sequences of buttons that they push in order to maximize their total damage over a given period of time. Unlike DPS, however, because of the fluid nature of triage healing, there is no specific rotation that any healer, including Sage healers, adhere to in order to maximize their healing. Rather, they utilize priority systems for their heals in order to heal any given member as much as possible in the shortest period of time. Now let's talk about single target healing. When I'm single target healing, for example, a tank, I will utilize the combination of Rejuvenate, Healing Trance, Deliverance, and Benevolence. Now the use of these 4 abilities takes less than 10 seconds, as you can see here, and heals the friendly target, given my current gear level, for about 23,000 total health without any critical hits. For our raid tanks, that's usually around 45 to 50% of their total health given any tank's gear. So that's a significant amount of heals in a short period of time. In addition, you can also utilize your Rejuvenate and Wandering Mend to bounce heals back and forth between yourself and the tank. Since the tank is taking constant damage, Wandering Mend should find its way back to the tank. Now, one thing you should note is that as of the 3.0 era, as of the 3.3 era, force management for a Sage healer is much more difficult. So it's very, very important that you always pay attention to your stacks of Resplendence and your total force pull. Usually, after I've done a round of those 4 abilities for single target healing, I always hit Vindicate and utilize a stack of Resplendence to restore my force to 100%. In long, drawn-out fights that last longer than 5 minutes or so, force management becomes critical in order to sustain a group to the end of a fight. If your force begins to fall below 50% and you're entering a burn phase, for example, it may cause trouble at the end of the fight, as you may not have enough force left in order to keep up a tank or keep your fellow healer alive, depending on the situation. So it's critical for a Sage to maintain a high force pull and be very mindful and attentive to that force pull. So now let's talk about AoE or multi-target heals. For a Sage, you generally have 2 options in order to heal multiple targets at once. First is using Rejuvenate with Wandering Mend, which will cast Wandering Men and fire all 4 charges at once, healing 4 members of the raid instantaneously. Now, Wandering Men, depending on your gear level, can heal from, at its base, 5,000 to a crit at its highest around 10 to 11k, which is a lot of heals that can go out on the group instantaneously. In addition, you can also utilize Salvation. Now, Salvation is an ability that uses a lot of force. In this case, for me, it uses almost 70 force points from my pool to actually use and cast. Now, that being said, you should only use Salvation generally when you have 3 or more people in range to actually receive heals from it in order to most efficiently use this heal for the amount of force that it sucks up from your pool. Now, that being said, the nice thing about Salvation is that once cast, as of the 3.0 era, people no longer have to stay within the ring of Salvation in order to actually get the heal over time effect. Rather, all they have to do is click the edge of it once, and they can receive all the subsequent heals left in that Salvation. Alright, so now let's look at the defensive and quote-unquote offensive cooldowns available to you as a Sage healer. First on the list is an ability called Force Armor. You get this quite quickly. Now, Force Armor, also known as the Bubble for obvious reasons, when cast on a user, prevents and mitigates a small amount of incoming damage for as long as it's up. So you can think of Force Armor as a short-term defensive cooldown not only for yourself, but for anybody in the raid, as you can cast it on anyone you'd like. That's an ally. Now, in addition to mitigating small spike damage, for example from adds or from a boss on a tank, when you cast Force Armor on yourself, Force Armor acts as a hot and heals you for up to 2% of your total health. This effect comes from the Life Ward utility. I like to use this utility to heal myself while I am simultaneously healing the rest of the raid. Now, in addition to Force Armor, Sages also have something called Force Barrier. Similar to Force Armor, Force Barrier mitigates damage to the Sage alone. Now, when activating Force Barrier, this barrier is impenetrable to almost every attack in the game. So you essentially become invincible for a short period of time. In addition, it also heals you like Force Armor does for a small heal over time effect. Now let's look at your quote-unquote offensive cooldowns. Now, unlike traditional offensive cooldowns, which you typically think of as cooldowns that increase the amount of damage you do, offensive cooldowns for a Sage healer means that you're increasing the number of heals, or you're increasing the size of the heals significantly over their normal range. So, for example, let's look at Force Potency first. When you click Force Potency, you get 2 stacks of the Force Potency buff. When 1 stack is consumed, it causes a critical hit on that heal. So here you can see that my Deliverance cast utilized 1 stack of Force Potency and critted for almost 12k. In addition to Force Potency, you also have something called Mental Alacrity. The Mental Alacrity has a 2-minute cooldown, which is a fairly long cooldown, but when you use it, it grants you 20% increased alacrity for 10 seconds. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but in a pinch, when your tank's about to die, or when there's a significant amount of damage going out on a DPS that wasn't anticipated, if you pop Mental Alacrity, for example, you can reduce the healing time of Deliverance from, for me, about 1.9 seconds down to about 1.6 seconds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in emergency situations, it's great. It's a great cooldown to use. So with that, I will end the tutorial. Thank you very much for your patience all, and I hope all these tips help you. So good luck, good rating, and good night.